Hi, and welcome to the Stefan Livera podcast, a show about Bitcoin and Austrian economics. Today, for episode 142, we've got the co-founder and CEO of ACINQ, Pierre-Marie Padiou, and he's on to tell us about his company and also his new wallet, Phoenix, which I think is quite possibly one of the easiest non-custodial Lightning wallet experiences out there today. So this podcast is brought to you by Kraken, one of the world's leading Bitcoin exchanges. They're one of the longest standing, they're consistently rated the best, they've got a high quality platform, they offer some great liquidity, they've got high trading volume and low fees with no minimum or hidden fees. They've also got Kraken Pro mobile app, delivering all the security and features you love about Kraken Exchange in a beautiful mobile-first design for Bitcoin trading on the go. There's Kraken OTC Desk for those seeking a more private, personalized service for large block trades. There's Kraken Margin, up to 5 times, and Futures, up to 50 times leverage. There's also Crypto Watch Platform, which is a popular charting and trading terminal for cryptocurrency markets. And their mission is to provide one powerful interface to scan prices, analyze market movements, and make trades. So go and find out more at kraken.com. This episode also presented to you by Unchained Capital, a Bitcoin financial services company empowering customers with financial freedom and control. All their products and services are built on the foundation of multi-sig. So Unchained offer a multi-sig 2 of 3 vault, which is a great option if you're thinking through how best to secure your Bitcoin. So you hold 2 keys, and Unchained would hold the 3rd key in that scenario. And then if you need to access liquidity without selling your Bitcoin, that's where you can use Unchained's collateralized loans. So you can put up some Bitcoin, you pay interest, all that Bitcoin is stored on-chain in dedicated multi-sig addresses, and it's never rehypothecated. They've also got some updates with notifications for pending transactions, key checks, and loan actions. They've also got a default external spend workflow with Caravan where you can copy-paste the redeem script so you've got verifiable information about your Bitcoin. They've got incredible content on their website as well, so make sure you go and look them up. The website is unchained-capital.com. Check out givebitcoin.io, the easiest and safest way to get your friends and family into Bitcoin. Give Bitcoin is now actually part of the parent brand Swan, and there's another product coming called Save Bitcoin. So Give Bitcoin is an awesome product because it helps advance people up that learning curve and turning them into a hodler. Sometimes when you just give it to them straight, they'll just lose that Bitcoin. So that's why there's value in Give Bitcoin, because you can buy it for your friends and family with just their email address. And that gift is time delayed with a regulated US custodian for 1 year. Give Bitcoin delivers 12 monthly lessons to that recipient. And there is input from many well-known Bitcoiners, such as Safety, Matt Odell, Citizen Bitcoin, and Jan Pritzker is recently now the CTO. I'm an advisor with a small equity stake as well. So keep an eye out for more exciting announcements coming from Give Bitcoin and Swan. The aim is to have a positive impact on Bitcoin adoption, so I'm excited to have them as a sponsor. Have you backed up your Bitcoin seed? Look into CipherSafe, cyphersafe.io. CipherSafe are producing the Cipher Wheel product. So if you've invested in a Bitcoin hardware wallet and you've got a BIP39 12-word or 24-word seed, make sure it's backed up in a way that's fireproof, waterproof, rust-proof, pet-proof, and tamper-evident. Cipher Wheel comes in a wheel shape and it masks the words of your seed unless you unlock the padlock tamper-evident seal so you know it's been opened. CipherSafe are also switching the stainless steel alloy used to improve the corrosion resistance, and otherwise the product scored an A versus heat and crushing on Jameson Lopp's recent round of physical seed testing. So make sure that you or your loved ones have access to your Bitcoins if an accident occurs. It's in pre-order now, and orders will be going out in early February, so go and order yours at cyphersafe.io. So on to the interview. Pierre, welcome to the show.
Hi, Stefan. Nice to see you again after Berlin, I think, last time we met.
That's right. I ran into you at the Lightning conference and we were talking about your new app, Phoenix, which you had just put out at that point as well. And I was very impressed by it. And we're going to get into all of that. So Look, let's just start with a bit of your story. I know you've been around Bitcoin for a little while and you're leading ACINQ. Can you tell us a little bit about yourself and how the company got started?
Yeah, well, I'm an engineer, a software engineer. So I'm a technical person, but I always wanted to create a company because basically I like freedom and I don't like to have bosses. So when I first heard about Bitcoin, I think it was maybe in 2012 or 2013, something like that. I was convinced that this created an environment where a lot of opportunity would arise, and at the same time, it was extremely interesting to me. So I didn't hesitate long before starting a company. And so ACINQ was founded in 2014. And we started working on Lightning in 2015. I think we were the second implementation to be developed shortly after C Lightning and shortly before LND. And we have been developing Eclair and doing variants of Eclair with Phoenix, with Eclair Mobile since then. And we're not going to stop, obviously. It's a long run. It's quite fascinating and very interesting because the fact that you can start from scratch with a blank page and the target being to have a global payment network. I mean, it's a one-time opportunity. So if you like building distributed systems, if you like technology, and if you like also working in an environment that's very complex and with a lot of impact on non-technical things like finance, politics, all that. That's very interesting. So I'm very happy to have the chance and of building ACINQ and working on the Lightning Network.
Right. And tell us a little bit about what your experience was like when you first read the Lightning Network white paper, and what was it that spurred you on to go and build a Lightning company?
Well, initially, so I told you that ACINQ was founded in 2014. Initially, we are building a hardware wallet. That's not a well-known fact, but we started building a hardware wallet around at the same time than Ledger. And if you know a bit about smart cards, you know that French have a history with smart cards. And so independently, Ledger and us just came up with the conclusion that smart cards were the appropriate tech to store your Bitcoins on. And the best part is that we were actually working in the same building as Ledger. They were running a co-working space that we were working into, and so we were developing the two things most at the same time without knowing that. I mean, we weren't talking to each other much, and but pretty quickly we realized that we were more or less working on the same topic, and so we had to move. And later on, we didn't have we didn't have a background in the hardware. We didn't have the connections required. The thing is that when you work with hardware and smart cards, you have to have some connections with manufacturers, because they usually work with large companies, banks, governments, things like that. They make orders of the size of 100K, more than that. So if you're a Bitcoin startup in 2014, there is no way you can ask for a few thousand chips. They're not gonna say yes. Ledger was able to pull that out because they had the relevant experience and the Ledger contact and the relevant contacts. That wasn't our case. And the thing is, when Lightning arrived, I mean, when the paper was released, this was much closer to our specialty. When I say we, it's mainly my co-founder, Fabrice, and myself. So it just made sense. We knew that it would be very difficult to develop. But it was just a paper at that time, and not a very precise paper. The paper was just the idea, some smart contracts, but a lot of things were left to the implementer. And at that time, in early 2015, Rusty Russell, who works at Blockstream, he did a fantastic job of, I think he published a series of blog posts, and I think it was getting to the ground with Lightning, something like that, where he he started working on how can we really implement this thing. How can we get past the theoretical white paper and build this thing? And this is how the specification project started. I mean, it was not a collective effort until 2016 at Scaling Bitcoin Milan, where the different teams who were collaborating on the mailing list mostly, but in a very unorganized manner until then. In Scaling Bitcoin Milan, then we went together and decided to try to formalize the Lightning specs. That's how the RFC effort started, and that's what allows now any other companies, like for example, take the Nayuta people, the Japanese company. They were able to implement a Lightning implementation, a full Lightning implementation, without any help whatsoever, just by reading the specification that were published on GitHub, which means that the effort was successful because the goal was to make the process of working on Lightning as permissionless as possible. I think the Nayuta story proves that that's one goal that we achieved.
Yeah, that's awesome to hear the story of how it came together. I'd also love to hear a little bit about that journey. As I understand, ACINQ had 2 rounds of funding. One in late, I think it was October 2018 for I think it was 1.7 million, and then another round more recently for 8 million. Can you tell us a little bit about that process and what was that like for you?
Well, it's my first startup, so I wasn't at all. I have no prior knowledge of dealing with funds and all of that. So the first fundraise that we did actually occurred in May, I think, 2018. We announced it a bit later, and it was at the time. So it was after 2017 and the big rush and the big. Everybody knows about that. The big bubble on Bitcoin and altcoins, and so this obviously sparked interest by investors, and at the same time, as a consequence of the inflow of users, the scalability limitations of Bitcoin were made more visible. That's where some people paid a lot of fees to make on-chain transactions when they wanted to, trade very quickly on some exchange. They probably paid too much, but I mean, the idea was that it would cost a lot of money if too many people were using the same blockchain space at the same time, which made our Lightning project very understandable for investors. So that's how we were able to raise money. But by the way, we are lucky to never have to go do a roadshow and look for money. It has always been people wanted to. Interested in our project and contacting us so we were able to choose who we want to work with, which is very important because as I told you at the beginning, what I like is freedom, and when you start to have investors, you lose a little freedom. So the fact that you can choose who you want to work with, it's a very big it makes a lot of difference from my perspective. And so that's the first round, and the second round happened in 2018, in July 2018. It's this one is interesting because I think it shows that it's very different. The situation is very different between 2018 and 2019 with regard to Lightning. Lightning mainnet has been deployed in very early 2018. So in 2019, we already have some things to look at, and it's not something in the future that's gonna that's going to be released in the future. It's something that exists today, even if it's very early. So what this fundraising means is that it made sense. And after a year of bear market, a year and a half even, again, it's smart investors can recognize the value of Bitcoin and not get lost with all the other blockchains that claim to solve everything by just tweaking some parameters. And it's very, it's very. I think it's very telling for the for the about the knowledge that external investors have about the space we're working on, that they're able to make that kind of investments at that time. What's funny too is that as part of this fund, as part of this raise, the French BPI, which is not a bank actually, but despite its name, BPI stands for Public Investment Bank. It's not a bank; it's just it's a public organism that supports innovation. So their job is to fund innovative startups, but obviously since they are state funded, they are not going to take some choices that are not politically correct. You see what I mean? So, and they have not invested in Bitcoin. They hadn't invested in Bitcoin before. They hadn't invested in Ledger, for example. The fact that they decided to join the round, it's a minor share, but still, it tells a lot about the perception of Bitcoin from again, not from the external from external people, not from investors, but from maybe from a more public standpoint. In 2018, right at the time when we made the first fundraise, our bank account got closed by our bank just because we were in Bitcoin. We don't do any trading whatsoever.
Oh, no.
I mean, but just because Bitcoin, our bank account got closed, and a year later, this BPI institution joined our capital. So I think it's a really interesting evolution. So that's pretty much it regarding the investments that we have. Obviously, the good news is that now we have enough funding to be able to continue the development of Lightning Network, which again is it's gonna take time. It's a very slow process, not because there's not enough people working on it. I mean, you could obviously we welcome obviously a lot more people to join, but even if there were I don't know 100,000 developers like Ethereum, it wouldn't. It would still not like arrive like that, because it's a whole infrastructure to develop. It's a protocol. It's tools for companies, for exchanges, for any company that works in the Bitcoin environment. It's tools also for users, wallets. And if you look at what we do at ACINQ, what products we have released so far, it's exactly that. We have worked on the protocol, and we have built tools in order to for any all the potential actors to have what is needed to join and to use the network.
Yeah, that's really interesting, the stuff you were mentioning there about how BPI France, it's basically like the French government is investing in a Bitcoin Lightning company in some ways.
Well, I mean, yes, I think this may have been a bit overblown by the media, the Bitcoin media, because it made like it's nice to see that to say a French government is investing in Bitcoin. It's actually, I mean, they support innovation. Yes, they do have ties. I mean, they are owned by the state, but they make their own decisions. But I think the one thing to remember is that 2 years ago, it wouldn't have this investment wouldn't have been possible. That's true for political reasons. Now it's possible. I don't think it's interesting to look deeper than that. It's just that, yeah. So it's not like France is buying into Bitcoin. France is buying into Bitcoin. It's just that Bitcoin sounds interesting, and Bitcoin is more and more well understood. And because the first natural reaction for a lot of government types is just to be scared and to just reject it right away.
Yeah, certainly, and it's positive from that perspective. So how big is the team at ACINQ?
There are 6 of us, so it's a very small team. Not that small compared to other Lightning teams. It's it's a small development community, really. But obviously, with the recent funding, we're looking to hire more people.
Awesome. And I mean, you've got a range of products, right? So you've got Strike and Eclair, and I think Phoenix will be really interesting to talk about. I think Phoenix is I've had a chance to try it out. I was really impressed, to be honest. I thought it was just wow, how quick it is to set up and spend and all of that.
It feels almost like if it's custodial, right?
Sorry?
It feels almost like if it's custodial.
Yeah, it really does. It does. So can you just give us an overview for the listeners who aren't familiar? What is Phoenix Wallet and what was the aim of Phoenix Wallet?
Okay, the aim is very simple. So as I said before, ACINQ existed in 2014 when Lightning Network, the word wasn't even invented yet. At that time, when we wanted to demonstrate what Bitcoin does, we did one thing. We told whoever was sitting in front of us, okay, can you download this Bitcoin wallet, whatever Bitcoin wallet you want? I'm going to send you $5, €5. Oh, okay, you get €5 and you can send it back to me or send it back to your friend. And that's where the magic happened, and people understood that, okay, the money is on my phone now. It's not my bank account. It's there. If I lose it, there's no one to save me. I'm responsible for it. I mean, the whole thing about no trusted third party, financial independence is very easy to explain from that starting point than just theoretically. And as a Bitcoin was more and more used by more and more people, this kind of demo was harder to make because it would cost more, and it wasn't just. I mean, as the network evolved, this particular use case of just sending a small amount of money, a small amount of bitcoins to other people was just not working with a non-chain wallet anymore. And what we wanted to do with Phoenix is exactly that. We wanted to be able to do exactly that same use case, very simple use case. You start from nothing. I send you bitcoins. You send me back these bitcoins. That's it. We wanted to be able to do that. And we didn't start from scratch because we had Eclair Mobile, which was released in 2017. Eclair Mobile was our first shot at trying to have a decent UX with Lightning. Remember that not so long ago, a lot of people didn't believe that it was possible to have a decent UX with Lightning, that it would be reserved to engineers or experts of Bitcoin, people knowing what a channel is and how to manage it and so on. So we had that experience with Eclair Mobile, but our aim was to have a very easily usable wallet. And so the goal there is a lot of work and a lot of engineering happening under the hood with Phoenix. But the goal for the end user, it's very simple. It's just you download the wallet, you show a QR code. The QR code is a bit bigger than what the QR code looked like a few years ago, but it's still the same thing. And some people scan this code, send you $5, and you have it. There you have it, and then you can send it back immediately too. There is no channels, no inbound liquidity issues, nothing. Everything is taken care of, and it's what I really. So it has been a lot of work in 2019, and what I really appreciate is that it seems so easy that some people don't believe how it works. Some people really think that, okay, but you do have some, it's hosted, right? Or it has to be custodial, or there has to be. No, it's just that we made some trade-offs. It's true that I think maybe we're gonna go over them, but at the core, it's very similar. I mean, 95%, 99% of Phoenix of the code is exactly the same as Eclair Mobile. It's you run a Lightning on your device. You have the private keys. You're watching the blockchain. We are using Electrum servers for that. You can point it to your own Electrum server, which is a recommended way to do. But you're still responsible for your funds. And yeah, we are really proud of what we have achieved with Phoenix, and we hope we have other plans and to improve it even more.
So let's just talk through a little bit of the setup and the typical experience that it is for a new person when they set up a Bitcoin wallet. Because many Bitcoin wallets, they'll force that user to go through write down the 12 words or write down the 24 words, right? So I noticed when I open Phoenix, it's different already because it's not forcing that straight away. It's just got a warning there saying, hey, you need to back up your 12 words, but you can actually just open the app, download it, install it, right? And you can just get started straight away without having to click around and do all that.
Exactly. And if you keep in mind the use case that I described you before, obviously the newbie that just wants to discover Bitcoin, you don't want him to take 5 minutes to write down his seed. He's not gonna do it. It's just a blocker. So what we did instead, and we had a user telling us that too. You should not block the onboarding process with this. We know that we have to back up, so just put a warning, and people will a persistent warning, and people are going to do it quickly after they have funds on it. And it's even better that they do it seriously, properly, when they take time to do it, and they don't screenshot it on their phone because they just want to get rid of the pesky window. So yeah, first, so when you download Phoenix and you run it for the first time, it will immediately arrive on the main screen displaying 0 Bitcoins. And now you're gonna hit on the receive button. And when you hit the receive button, it displays a QR code. It's a Lightning payment request. So at that point, you don't have any channels. You don't have readily available inbound liquidity. What we could have done was that for each new wallet that starts somewhere, our node, the ACINQ node, could create upfront a channel to this mobile. That works too. The problem is that first, we don't know for sure if the user is really about to receive Bitcoins or if it's just installing the app and not doing anything with that. And if we have 1 million users doing that, then it's gonna cost us a lot of money. And I mean, it's a potential attack vector, right? So the idea we had with Phoenix is to reverse that, which is find a way for the user to generate a Lightning invoice, even if it doesn't have a Lightning channel or any Lightning channels yet. And only when we see an incoming payment, then we can tell, okay, we have an incoming payment for you. You don't have any channels. But if you want, we can, now that we know that there is incoming payments for you, an incoming payment for you, then we can open a channel and take a fee, take it out of the incoming payments, which solves the issue that I described before, because then we're not going to spend money upfront. Users are gonna pay for this inbound liquidity when they need it, and that can scale. If we have 1 million people doing that, that can scale because we're not going to pay upfront for all those users.
Okay, yeah, that's great. And could you maybe go a little bit deeper into what's happening behind the scenes there? So, as I understand, that QR code really, it's actually got like a Lightning invoice, and correct me if I'm wrong, but my understanding is it's got like a routing hint to a private channel that doesn't exist yet.
Yes.
And then as soon as let's say you're setting up the newbie, as soon as you make that payment, then all of a sudden it knows, okay, now there's an incoming payment. Then it asks you, do you want to set up the channel? Can you explain a little bit about what's going on there?
Yeah, so on the Lightning Network, there are two types of channels. You have public channels who are publicly announced on the network, and you have private channels. Private channels, the idea is that you don't necessarily have to publish all the channels you have. Typically for a mobile phone, like if you take Eclair Mobile only opens private channels. When you create an invoice, you have to tell somehow the payee, the person who is going to pay this invoice. You have to have a way to tell him how to find this private channel. So maybe the route is going to go through public channels, and the last hop is going to use your private channels. And so you have to tell about those channels. And that's done with routing hints. So when you create an invoice on Lightning, you have the possibility, it's optional, to say, okay, you can use whatever route you want. But if you need it, those channels that are not necessarily public, they do exist, and you can go through this route. So we use it, and a lot of mobile Lightning wallets use that. That's also why, if we didn't have those private channels, we would have a lot of problems already with the Lightning Network routing table, because there would be a lot more channels. And syncing the routing table is already it's not an easy task for mobile devices, because there are constraints in terms of performance and resources. So building on that, what Phoenix does is it adds a routing hint to its invoice. But contrary to Eclair Mobile, this routing hint doesn't point to an actual channel. It points to a fake private channel. And that goes from our node to your Phoenix wallet. And what happens is that the payee will find a route, and the only route which can go to this to Phoenix will have to use this routing hint. So it will go to our node, and then we can say, okay, I see that the next channel in the route is this random identifier, and I know that this random identifier isn't really an actual channel. It's actually just a pointer to this particular Phoenix, and that's how we do the routing. So we kind of hacked a bit the way the routing occurs at the last hop, but it's exactly the same from the point of view of the rest of the network, from the point of view of the sender, from the point of view of the receiver too. It's strictly compliant Lightning. The only thing is that when we do the last hop, it's not really a channel that we are. It's not really a channel identifier. It's some other kind of identifier that we can reserve to a node. And at that point, maybe there is no actual channel to the Phoenix user, and that's when we can ask the user if he needs us to create a channel at that time. And that's how we solve the onboarding process. Basically, you start with 0, someone scans the QR code, and then you're gonna see a pop-up that says, okay, we have an inbound payment for you. We offer to create to do a setup. We don't even talk about channels. To do a setup, it's gonna cost you that much. Do you accept or not?
Got it. And actually, I'm curious, what happens if you press no there?
Well, if you press no, so again, this payment is a real Lightning payment. So there is a pre-image, right? Even if the last hop in the route, which is our node, he knows that there is an incoming payment. What we have is an incoming HTLC, a hashed time lock contract. Just a contract. We know that if we have the pre-image to this hash, then we're gonna be able to pull the money. But we need this pre-image. So then we ask Phoenix, do you want us to create a channel? If you want to, then you have to give me the pre-image. If he says no, I don't want to, I don't want to give you the pre-image. I don't want this new channel to be created. Then we know that it's not gonna give us the pre-image, so we can fail. So it's really we have tweaked some parts of Lightning, but it's very, very marginal. It's very small modifications. The whole process that guarantees that it's trustless, that guarantees that I can't pull money. I can't take money from a sender if I haven't forwarded the payment correctly. It still exists, and if it didn't, then that wouldn't. I mean, it wouldn't be interesting at all. We would have lost everything that makes Lightning interesting.
Right. Yeah. So in other words, basically that payment through to the the newbie Phoenix user, it would just fail, and they would just do something. They would try again with the new one, right? And I guess it's also really just interesting as well, because it just means that if you are trying to help a new person set up, then maybe you might want to have either a direct channel with the async node, or at least a route to the async node, so that your payment can more easily go to that newbie, right? To that person who's just set up their Phoenix wallet, right?
Yes. I mean, the good thing with our node is reasonably well connected. So even if you don't have a direct channel to us, there is a good chance that your payment succeed.
Yeah.
Which is something that's you have probably heard the presentation made by Christian Decker in Berlin about the success rate of payments. That's something that's I mean, it's kind of off topic. I'm kind of off topic now, but the reliability of payments and the overall success rate of making payments on Lightning is a very, very important thing. Even if we just discussed about end user and a pretty UX, pretty UIs, at the core, this is all useless, completely useless, if the network, the core of the network isn't reliable enough. So yeah, that was a side.
Yeah, no, that's totally fair. And we might get to the more broader points around Lightning later. But let's just keep it to Phoenix for now. One point that I noticed is right now that invoice rather is amountless, and some wallets treat that, and maybe rightfully so, that's a security risk because, for example, I tried to fund my Phoenix wallet with a Zap payment, and I think Zap wallet actually doesn't regard that as a valid invoice. So what I actually had to do was put in a manual amount. And as I understand, the reason for that is that if you do an amountless invoice without using the payment secret flag or whatever it is, then I think one of the intermediate hops, or maybe the second last hop, can steal the fee, or steal that as a fee. Is that essentially the correct understanding there?
Yes, that's true. The second to last hop, that's I used the last hop as in my previous explanation, but it's actually, yes, the second to last hop in the route. He can change the amount, basically, so he can reduce the amount and take the difference for him. So what the payment secret does is that he can't change anymore the amount. And yes, invoiceless
amountless invoices.
Amountless invoices, yes, they are a security risk. And we do display a warning also on Phoenix when you pay an invoiceless, an amountless invoice, because that's a risk. We decided not to prevent it altogether because we wanted to the user to have the choice. And also, since we knew that a payment secret was right around the corner, it would have created confusion, because we would have prevented it, then allowed it again, and the risk didn't seem that big. So we just added a warning, very explicit, and the user can choose what he wants. But yes, that's
Yeah. So anyway, for listeners, I guess if you're trying to help someone set up on Phoenix, what you might want to do is just make sure you put in a manual amount. So then that way, for now, if you've got Zap wallet or some other wallet, you can still pay that and then fund your, the person you're trying to onboard into Lightning. So that's really cool. Now,
yeah. there's if you already have Phoenix and you onboard someone on Phoenix, then you can use an amountless invoice, because our implementation of Trampoline already has the payment secret thing. So if you do a Phoenix to Phoenix payment, that's not gonna be a problem.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's a good point to note, and we'll get to trampoline routing as well. I think one other point I wanted to touch on as well is that you have two options to fund. You can fund that wallet with Lightning payment or just with a Bitcoin payment. And as I understand, it's not actually a submarine swap like the trustless style, but it's more just like a trusted swap in. Could you outline a little bit of that process if somebody wants to fund it with a Bitcoin payment?
Yeah.
On chain,
So
that is.
The idea is just you can send to your. So Phoenix is pure Lightning. All the funds you have in Phoenix are on Lightning, but we want it to be to make it very easy to send funds to your Lightning wallet from a legacy Bitcoin wallet. So it's a swap. We went with a trusted swap, which means that when you use the swap feature, either from Lightning to on-chain or from on-chain to Lightning, then you trust us to in this operation. Basically, you pay us the amount, and then we make the swap. That's trusted. The reason we went with that scheme is that trustless swap. Well, for starters, they don't exist. It's not entirely trustless. You still have in one case to pay the fee upfront. So you're trusting for not for the amount of the swap. You're trusting only for the fee that the swap service is going to charge you. So it's definitely better from that standpoint, but it's not perfect. So that's one of the reasons, and the other reasons is that the construct is more complicated. It's going to have more transactions, and so it's going to cost more. And the third reason is that in one direction, I don't remember on the top of my head. I don't know if it's a swap in or swap out, but in one of the cases, then the sending wallet needs to understand what it is doing, meaning that it needs to speak the swap protocol, and so you wouldn't be able to just send funds to your Phoenix wallet from any legacy Bitcoin wallet, which is kind of a big problem, because then everything is broken basically. From the good UX point of view, everything is broken, because then you have to understand a lot of things, and then it's not good. So we decided to go with a very simple alternative, which is again trusted, and I believe that it's a choice that makes sense for the Phoenix use case.
Yeah, right. Okay, and so we've covered that. I think another thing, maybe we just point out the fees as well. So that's an aspect as well, just so all the listeners are aware exactly what are the fees. So I've just read from the website and pulled that together. So as I see it, the fee for sending is 10 sats plus 0.1% of the amount sent. So as I understand, then if you're paying $100, that means you're paying 10 cents on $100, right? If you're sending a Lightning payment. And then if you're doing... Oh, sorry, go on.
Yeah, so regarding the fees, so there is the difference between the swap fees and the on-the-fly creation fees and the payment fees. The reason is that, so when you pay a Lightning invoice from Phoenix, you're using Trampoline, which means that you are delegating the route computation to a third-party node, which currently is our node. In the future, the goal is to have a multitude of Trampoline nodes, and you would build a route not from hop to hop, but from Trampoline node to Trampoline node, and each Trampoline node will have to figure out the route to the next Trampoline node. And the consequence of that is that from the point of view of Phoenix, when you pay the invoice, you don't know what the route will be. So you don't know what the fee is going to be. So it makes it very easy to make payments, because you don't have to bother about the route. I mean, I'm talking from a computational perspective, but you have to be pessimistic, because you you make the HTLC, you send the payment to the trampoline node, and then you hope that whatever fee you have added to your payment will be enough to cover the route to the destination. And so with trampoline, the fee has to be pessimistic. That's the first thing. And second is that currently in our implementation in the Phoenix as is today, we don't have any retry mechanism. It's very, very basic. So we have to be extremely pessimistic because there is no retry mechanism if the fee we choose is not enough. So what I mean is that in an upcoming version, it's not far in the future. We are testing it currently, so it's gonna be the ETA in a few weeks. The goal is for Phoenix to have a rough estimate of how much it's gonna cost, how much the actual route is going to cost, and then try to send a payment with that much fee. And maybe the trampoline node is going to answer, no, it's not enough. Sorry, best I can do is that, and then you can try again. Which means that those payment fees are going to be reduced significantly. That's what I wanted to say on the so it's different from the other fees which are for the swap and for the channel creation. Those fees, they are used, so they are basically 0.5% for the when you receive an incoming payment, which covers the cost for us to open a channel. So which means opening a Bitcoin creating a Bitcoin transaction on the blockchain. And swapping is the same, because swapping, it implies creating a new channel in the way we have implemented it. So it's the same thing. And so that's 0.5%.
Yep, got it. So then basically, if somebody is funding it for $100 with an on-chain transaction, that will cost about 50 cents roughly. Okay, and then I guess for the swap out case, so as Phoenix is a fully Lightning wallet, and if you want to pay an on-chain Bitcoin address, there is also a fee associated with that. And as I understand, that is basically associated for the miner fee for that swap out, correct?
Yes, I mean, obviously, yes. The network miner's fee is going to. I mean, what you pay is the miner's fee. What I was about to say is that it depends on the actual fee rate at the time when you make the swap, but also it depends on the state of our Bitcoin wallet. If we have a lot of small UTXOs, which can be the case because we manage a decent number of channels, then it might cost significantly, not because the fee rate is currently high, but because that's what our wallet is looking that's the state of our UTXOs at the time of the swap.
Yeah, got it. So to summarize, then it's basically the miner fee and also the ACINQ's wallet, because depending on the number of UTXOs available, that it might be more or less easy to do that on-chain transaction.
We have no interest at all in taking a fee at that time for us. It obviously it's a good thing for us to do that because it allows us to consolidate our UTXOs, but we're not taking a direct fee. And one thing that we're gonna do for the swap out, so Lightning to Bitcoin, it's to allow the user to choose the priority, which he can't currently, which will allow finer grained control on the fees.
Yeah, cool. Another point I was really interested to talk about is MPP. Now, I had a chance to, again, I was testing and playing around with the wallet, obviously, in preparation, and I went into my Phoenix wallet, and then I went to the settings, and I looked at my channel list, and then I saw I had 2 channels, and then what I wanted to do was test out MPP by making a payment to one of my own nodes, but just deliberately over the size of that channel, just to see how it would work. And I found it worked just like that. It was really cool. And when I made the payment, it actually showed, this was an atomic multipath payment. So tell us a little bit about that. And I think, as far as I can understand, this is one of the first Lightning wallets that really supports that all the way through.
Yes. I mean, we don't particularly market that because what is interesting for us, it's one part of earlier in the discussion, I said that there was a lot of engineering in the background to make Phoenix really seamless. AMP is part of that engineering. It's one of the building blocks. When you have it, it seems seamless and it disappears completely from your mind. It just works. But when you don't have it, it's really it's basically impossible to know how you can spend your funds. So there is not much to say about it. It's just that even if in the background you may have, depending on how you have used your wallet, depending on how you have fun in it, you may have 1 or 10 channels. It doesn't matter at all. You can spend it like if it was one big channel. And the important part, the catch-22 is that it's not enough to have AMP. You also have to have what we call the zero reserve feature. So the zero reserve, it's not it sounds a technical thing, but it has big impact on the usability of the wallet. So the goal of the reserve in Lightning channels is to make sure that both parties at all time have something at stake. Otherwise, if you don't have something at stake, then you can try to cheat because you have nothing to lose. That's why there is a reserve. The problem is that if you combine a reserve with AMP, then you don't have, it's not linear anymore. It's not the same thing if you have 2 channels that both need to maintain a reserve. Even if you have AMP, it's not the same thing compared to having 1 channel. Because if you have 2 channels, then you're going to have 2 times a reserve, and you can't. It's not. You won't be able to spend from 0 to the sum of both of your channels seamlessly. So what we have done is we have created a special type of channel where Phoenix users have the right to have a 0 reserve. So their balance in the channel can go all the way to 0, which means that in that particular case, our node trusts a bit more Phoenix users than the opposite, because our node still has to maintain a standard reserve. So we always have something at stake, whereas Phoenix users don't always have something at stake. And we did that because we know that if people try to cheat, we are gonna be able to notice that on the blockchain, and we're still gonna be able to get our funds back.
Gotcha. Yeah, so I guess the way to understand that for listeners is basically, in this case, ACINQ is kind of taking on that risk on behalf of the customer in some ways to make it easy for the user. But it means ACINQ has to now watch the blockchain to make sure there are no cheating attempts, right?
No, it's not that we're taking the risk on behalf of the customer. It's just that. So in a Lightning channel, it's like a Mexican standoff. It's everybody is looking at everybody else, and if you don't behave correctly, then you're gonna get punished. So when you have 2 parties in a channel, both are watching the blockchain to make sure that the other party isn't cheating. What we do by allowing one party's balance to go all the way to 0 is that now they can try to cheat without any consequence, because the way the punishment mechanism works in Lightning is that the honest node will be able to sweep the funds of the dishonest node. But if the dishonest node doesn't have any money, it doesn't change anything. So eBay tries to cheat. So what we did is that since Phoenix users don't have a reserve, there may be cases where they could try to publish a revoked transaction. That's it. So it's not that we are taking the risk on their behalf. It's just we are taking a risk deliberately to ensure that the UX is good for Phoenix users.
Gotcha. Yeah, sorry, I could have worded that a bit more precisely. Okay, I'm also keen to talk about the other big trade-off, which we obviously have to talk about, which is around privacy and trampoline routing. So let's talk a little bit about this. So I guess let's start with the first observation, which is that currently ACINQ node knows the public key of the person you are trying to pay, and then the amount. And can you tell us a little bit around, how you're thinking about that from a privacy point of view, and then potentially lead into what trampoline routing is?
Okay, so there is a difference between. So we have done several trade-offs. There is difference between the trade-offs that I mentioned with regard to swaps, which to us just makes sense, and it's unless there is some new ideas, those trade-offs are going to stay in the foreseeable future. But, yes, if you do a swap, you're gonna have to trust us because we don't have a better way to do it. There's a difference between that and our current trampoline implementation, which limitations are just because it's not a final version. Just want to start with that because to us it makes a big difference between the persistent trade-offs and those which we believe are temporary. So what happens is that when you make a payment on Lightning, on Phoenix, on Lightning from Phoenix, you delegate the computation of the route to a trampoline node. In the current implementation of Phoenix, this trampoline node is our node, is the ACINQ node. So basically what you do is you send an HTLC, and in the next hop, I'm summarizing, but basically it's how that works. In the next hop, it's not a direct neighbor of our node. It's some remote node. It's actually the destination. So this implies that we know what payments, what amount you're paying, and we know the destination of the node. And we also know your ID, obviously, because you're talking to us. So from that perspective, Phoenix in its current version, it offers it's exactly the same. We have exactly the same information as if we were a hosted Lightning Wallet provider. So that's the state of Phoenix right now. If we release it that way, it's because we know that it's not going to be the case in the future. So how does trampoline works in a fully deployed setup? You have, instead of having only one trampoline node, you have a multitude of trampoline nodes in the network. And Phoenix knows a decent number of trampoline nodes. It doesn't have to know all of them, but it needs to know, I don't know, maybe 100 of them, something like that, as opposed to knowing the full routing table if Phoenix wanted to compute the route itself. So then Phoenix has, let's say, 100 trampoline nodes. He can randomly pick trampoline nodes within that set and do a route that goes through all those trampoline nodes, and that the last hop in the route will be the destination. Which means that from the point of view of a trampoline node, you have the same information as from the point of view of a regular Lightning node today, when you only know what's before and what's after, and you don't know where you are in the route. The goal is to have exactly that. If you will, it's like instead of doing source routing between adjacent nodes, which is the case with regular routing on Lightning currently, we are doing source routing between trampoline nodes. And each trampoline node figures out by itself the route to the next trampoline hop. So in theory, the privacy that you can have with this scheme, what we believe is that it's at least equal to what we have currently. Because if without trampoline, the routing table will keep increasing. It keeps increasing every time there is a new public channel and every time there is a new node with public channels. And mobile devices, they have to sync this routing table. At some point, they're not going to be able to sync the whole routing table, right? So they will have to prune it. But they will have to prune it in a way that reasonably makes sure that they can reach anyone in the network. And there is a good chance that these heuristics will result in a lot of mobile devices having the same pruned view of the graph. Does that make sense what I'm saying?
Yeah. So, and there could be potentially a privacy implication of that,
Exactly.
right? That they don't, if there's only, say, basically it limits the potential ways that you could have routed it through. And
Yes.
part of Lightning, one of the ideas that even from a recent interview with Rusty was saying is this idea of potentially trying to make the routing a little bit more like a random walk, such that it is more private and you can't infer from the length roughly where that person was routing the payment from.
Exactly. So my point is that with the current routing scheme, we could argue that from the point of view of the random walk target, we are going to hit a wall with the current way of doing routing. With trampoline, suppose there are a lot of trampoline nodes on the network. Then you can select a random subset of this of those trampoline nodes. You don't have to have a complicated heuristics to be able to make sure that you will still be able to reach whatever whoever payee you want to reach. You just take a random subset of trampoline nodes, which allows you then your payment routes to look much more like a random walk. So because you don't have to have a very complex heuristics that guarantees that yes, you are pruning a view of the network, but it's still you're still be able to find the destination that you want to find.
Yeah.
So bottom line is that it's absolutely true that the current implementation of trampoline, the way we have done it in Phoenix, it does leak payment information to our node. That's true. But it's not a property of trampoline. It's just a property of the way we have implemented it currently.
Yep. And I guess I was looking through some of the Lightning spec discussion, and I noticed T-Bast from your team was discussing and trying to propose this idea, and there was a little bit of feedback from some others like Matt Corallo and Z-Man, right? And I think Matt Corallo's concern was something like, it might, and I think it was what you were basically saying, is that it might impact the privacy. And I think his concern was like, we don't want to help the clients reduce their route map size because that might be taking a step backwards in Lightning from a privacy perspective. Yes. So I guess that's kind of a bit of a debate that has to get resolved before trampoline routing comes to Lightning Network, right?
It is a debate, and the argument that I just made are basically the same that Bastien did on the pull request. And I mean, it's definitely a sensitive topic, and I think it's great that you are able to see that it's not like if any change that happens on Lightning is just a walk in the park for everyone. We still have to convince others. We are pretty sure that it's a good way to improve routing on Lightning, but definitely other people may think differently, and we will have to convince them. So if from the point of view of a user, a simple Lightning user, I find that very reassuring.
Yeah. So hopefully, we can see what happens with that. And I think they're probably the key points that I was keen to. Oh, one other point around Phoenix and the seed. So with the seed, is it basically just a BIP39 seed on the BIP84, like the BC, the BESH32?
Yes.
That's so in terms of recovery.
So what happens is that when you have a Lightning channel, what it means to have a Lightning channel, it's basically to hold a commitment transaction that represents the current state of the channel. This commitment transaction is to be published on chain if something wrong happens. And what your seed protects is the address that this commitment transaction pays to. So just having the seed, if the commitment transaction is published, just having the seed is enough to recover your funds. And what we have been careful to do is to follow the same path as standard Bitcoin wallets. So you can use, we actually recommend using Electrum when you want to to recover your funds. If something happens and the channel gets force closed, it shouldn't happen with Phoenix, or very very rarely, much more rarely than for Eclair Mobile, for example. But it can happen. It can definitely happen. We had one user. We had a bug that's fixed in the last version of Phoenix that caused, in a very corner case, but that caused channel to be force closed. Then the user just had to install Electrum, enter the seed, and boom, the funds were there. He was able to just swap them in to his new Phoenix wallet. So just we're following the BIP 39, BIP 84, and it's based to a regular SegWit address.
Excellent. And let's talk a little bit about Eclair. So as I understand, Eclair Mobile, I should say, which was the first, your first Lightning wallet. And my understanding is you're still maintaining Eclair Mobile as well. And that is seen more like a power user or developer or enthusiast wallet, correct?
Yes, Eclair Mobile gives you the raw experience of Lightning. It's like it's not hiding anything. It's not trying to hide complexity. It just shows things as they are on a more lower level. So you have to manage an on-chain and off-chain balance. You have to create channels yourself. You can open channel to anyone you want. Currently doesn't support AMP, but it's gonna support AMP soon. So it's a great way to use Lightning if you absolutely want to know what's happening under the hood. If you don't like the fact that you're connected to our node, so with Eclair Mobile you're completely off the hook. You can connect to whoever you want. You can connect to your own node. And I think Rusty likes to connect Eclair Mobile to his C Lightning nodes just to test interoperability with between our implementations. I mean, you can do whatever you want. It's a different set of trade-offs, so it makes sense for us to keep maintaining it.
Excellent. Look, I'd love to talk a little bit more about Lightning Network just more broadly. Do you have any views around how big this thing can get, how fast can transactions be, right? Because you see all sorts of different numbers, right? Like if you look at the Lightning Network paper, it says like millions of transactions per second. And I think once you consider actual hardware limitations and things, it might be like per node, it might be something closer to like 100 transactions per second. And then let's say you've got however many routing nodes that you see being out there. What's your sort of view on how that evolves? Do you see it being like, okay, there'll be a solid, 5,000 routing nodes out there?
Yeah, on the performance side, to me, there is no limitation because it's a horizontal scaling issue. There is, even if you have hardware performance limitation, you can still distribute one Lightning node. There is no reason why you wouldn't do it. So just because our node is identified by a single node ID doesn't mean that it has to be one single computer. It can be it can be used. So to me, there is on the throughput from the throughput point of view, there is no limitation. I don't see why there would be a limitation. On the total number of nodes, I think this is related to the discussion that we had about trampoline. The limitation is going to be for leaves in the network for endpoints to find routes in this network. And the first nice things were private channels, and we may need to go further than that. We believe that trampoline is the appropriate way to work on that, but there may be other ways. I believe that's going to be the main limitation for technical limitation. I mean, for the number of nodes.
Yeah. And I had one other question as well, which was just around centralization on the Lightning Network.
Yes.
And permissioning, right? So I was curious to get your view on if you think Lightning, because if you listen to a skeptic right now, again, I'm bullish on Lightning, right? But if you listen to a skeptic, they might say something like, oh, look, it's going to end up being really permissioned. And there's just going to be a bunch of big nodes that become hubs and you have to go through them. And that will impinge on the permissionless censorship-resistant nature of Lightning. What's your take on that?
Well, two things. First thing, there are going to be large nodes. I mean, it's obvious that if you have like exchanges, we have seen recently we have seen Bitstamp and Bitfinex run a node. If Lightning is to succeed, obviously large companies will have large hubs, large nodes. It's obvious. I think what's important is will it still be possible, feasible to run a node if you're not if you run a small node. I think that's the proper way to look at the issue. Not to try to limit the size of the larger nodes, but to still make sure that it makes sense and you have the guarantees that you want to have if you want to bypass those nodes completely. It's really important to be able to bypass those nodes. So that's why I don't see an immediate issue with that. Like if you compare to mining, you can't make, I don't know, $10,000 or $100,000 investment and become a miner. You can't do it. The barriers to entry are too high. But it's not the same with Lightning. You can run a Lightning node even if you have not millions of dollars, and you still be able, like if you want to pay someone that some large hub don't want you to pay, you can still bypass that large hub. So I think that's essential with regard to the basic properties of Bitcoin that we absolutely want to preserve with Lightning. But that's actually only a part of a more general point of if Lightning is to succeed, will it be centralized? Will it be permissioned? I think it can't succeed if it's permissioned because it's really all or nothing. I mean, from my point of view, when you design a protocol like Lightning, which is complicated, it's complex, it's costly to develop and to, I mean, it's basically what we are doing is working around the hard limitation that we have when we work on Bitcoin. It's a very limited space. What can we do to make the best of it? So it has a cost, and we have to have properties that justify that we pay that cost. So if we don't have those properties, and if it's more expensive than a centralized payment system like I don't know, PayPal, then it just doesn't make sense, and so it's not going to succeed. So to me, either Lightning keeps the properties that Bitcoin offers, and then maybe it can succeed. There are other potential way it can fail. Maybe someone find a flaw, or maybe I don't know. But it's a requirement, or it can't protect those properties. In that case, it's not gonna be competitive anyway compared to centralized services. So it has no way of having any success.
Yeah. And also, do you have a view? Very interesting thoughts. And do you have a view on things like another angle of centralization being perhaps the need for liquidity management? So, for example, if somebody needs to continually replenish a channel, then are they now more dependent on there being enough submarine swap or just trusted swap providers to allow them to, basically manage their channel balance? Or do you see it like maybe some of the technical innovations coming and, MPP and some of these other things might, lessen the need for that kind of thing?
Okay, so in my opinion, MPP helps. Given a snapshot of the network, MPP helps when you want to maximize your chances of making a given payment. But that's pretty much it. I don't think MPP will have an impact on the more, like the bigger picture of what's going on with liquidity.
Yeah.
I'm not really convinced that things like channel rebalancing are going to help a lot, because
I mean, it depends what's the scope of it. If by rebalancing you mean going to the chain, then of course it will help, because it means you're getting out of the Lightning Network and going back to the Lightning Network. So you can basically that's what it does when you go on chain. So then if there are some uh, payments that always go in one direction, then you can cut that off and then put back reallocate liquidity. What I think is that we don't know yet. There are a lot of unknowns. I mean, there are a lot of unknowns in Bitcoin in general and in Lightning Network in particular. We don't know what the overall flow of payments will look like, and this will have a big impact on liquidity needs. For example, if you have like a huge Amazon is accepting Lightning. Is it gonna be a big problem regarding to liquidity? I don't think so, because if Amazon runs a node, they're going to mostly receive funds, mostly, which means that they won't have to allocate funds themselves. It's other people in the network that see that there is an opportunity to route payment to Amazon, which will provide that liquidity. So what Amazon will do is just wait for their channels to be full and then close them and get back that the funds on chain and do whatever they want to. Maybe they're gonna refund some clients sometimes. So maybe they're gonna, but mostly they're going to receive. So it's not a big problem. And I believe that most of the time end users will end up paying. Obviously you may want to receive funds, and that's what of the task of the harder task we had on Phoenix. But I think the overall you're gonna get paid. You're gonna have your salary or something every now and then, and every day you make payments. And this is okay because you're going to provide liquidity yourself to the network, and it turns out pretty well. For routing nodes that don't mostly send money and don't mostly receive money, that's more or less equally, then yes, they will have to have enough they will have to have enough liquidity on both sides, and they can't decide who they allocate their funds to, but they can't decide they can't tell people to open channels to them, or they have to have some. There has to be some good reason for that. So routing nodes will be limited. They will have to have a decent amount of capital on their node, and they will have to have the ability to secure it, which we all know is not an easy task if you ask the exchanges. And the exchanges are offline, routing nodes are online. So that, by the way, will be also probably a limiting factor to the size of routing nodes. So I don't. To me, it's not this liquidity thing. It's not the most pressing issue, provided that to me the most difficult part to solve was the inbound liquidity thing for end users, which we worked around that by introducing a little trust with the on-the-fly channels that we went over before. But apart from that, I don't see it as a very limiting factor currently. I mean, at least it's way after the routing part, in my opinion.
Got it. Yeah, no, that's really good reflections there. I suppose just to finish it off, then, what are you most excited about for 2020 with Bitcoin and Lightning, just generally? Is there anything you're particularly looking forward to, or that you're hoping we get in 2020?
Well, as someone who's most interested in building software as opposed to trading, I'm not following the price of Bitcoin a lot, but obviously I'm looking forward to the halving just to see what happens. It's I think I mean, everybody says that, and I think it's really true. It was really nice to be able to have a period of time when things were more quiet, so that we could build what we have to build more peacefully. So this halving thing kind of contradicts that. I hope we still be. I mean, I don't really want to see the craziness of 2017, and but it's exciting too because we have Lightning now. We didn't have it in 2017, and what's pretty interesting is that if this halving creates a new euphoria, I mean a new inflow of users, we will be ready. Will the Lightning network be ready? I mean, Phoenix can be one answer to that. Is the network as a whole reliable enough to handle more users? I think that's an open question. I think we are very early. So it's gonna be if that happens, it's gonna be a big test. So that's from the Bitcoin, Bitcoin and Lightning point of view, and also on the purely Lightning part, we had this meeting in Australia, actually in Adelaide, end of 2018, in which we discussed the next main features of Lightning. AMP was one of those features, but we are not done yet. So we are still in the process of implementing all of those, and there is dual funding, there are also splice in, splice out. There are a lot of things which are very exciting. They take a long time to develop. I feel it's like it must feel even longer for users because they don't even know when that's gonna happen. We mostly we're not sure either, but there are a lot of things that are in the pipe. I think the transition from Lightning, the UX in 2018 and the Lightning UX in 2019 and 20 shows that there are a lot of things that we can do on the protocol side to actually improve user experience for end users, and it's not gonna stop. So for people who were afraid that it would never be possible to have the same, a decent UX on Lightning, a decent, an easy way to receive our send funds on Lightning, I think the recent developments show that there are a lot of improvement that we can do, and they show also that there are a lot of future, even further improvement that we can make. So it's a lot of work, but a lot of interesting perspectives for Lightning.
Yeah, and look, I've got to say, I think you guys have done a great job with Phoenix in making a non-custodial experience that's really smooth, really easy. I've found it really really impressive to just play around with the app, and I've played around with Lightning apps, and this one was really impressive. So I could definitely see myself being able to help if I wanted to onboard a newcomer into Lightning. This is probably what I would go with, right? So. Look, I guess as we close it out, just make sure you let the listeners know where can they find you online, where can they find ACINQ, and where can they download Phoenix. Oh, and also Phoenix for the iPhone as well.
Yeah, well, in 2020, we are working on it. For now, we have only released Android apps. Eclair Mobile was Android. Phoenix currently is Android, but we are working on an iOS version, so it's gonna be a big next step for Phoenix in 2020. So our website is ACINQ.co. There is a dedicated landing page for Phoenix, which is phoenix.acinq.co. All our software, our server node, Eclair Mobile, Phoenix, Strike, all of those, they run on our Eclair stack, which is a full implementation of Lightning written in Scala. Our GitHub, it's on GitHub. All our mobile applications are open source. It's Eclair Mobile and Phoenix on GitHub, and you're welcome to contribute. For developers, we prefer using Gitter. So it's on our Eclair GitHub. There is a link to our Gitter page. And for support, in Telegram seems to work a bit better. So we also have a dedicated Twitter account for Phoenix users that you can use to have support. And yeah, that's pretty much it.
a lot of ways to get in touch with us.
Awesome. Well, I'll include the links in the show notes, and thank you again for joining me, Pierre. It's been a great fun chatting with you.
Great to talk with you, Stefan.
So I hope you found that useful, and obviously if you're a Lightning hardcore purist, you'll run your own stack with your own LND and Zap or Zeus, etc. However, I think for a newbie or a newcomer to Bitcoin and Lightning, this is a great wallet to set them up with. And if you need to do a demonstration at a Bitcoin meetup or with your family and friends, this is a great one to try because it's non-custodial and it's extremely quick to set up. There's a real wow factor when you demonstrate this for people and then get them to do a payment as well. So give that a try. I hope you enjoyed it. Check out my website at stefanlivera.com. Also, just a quick note for Patreon supporters, I'm going to start now putting up the ad-free version of the show and early for those people as well. So thanks, and I'll see you in the Citadels.